Hello traders, Cousin Vinny coming to you from theclosingprint.com on June the 22nd, 2019. In this edition of your weekend video newsletter, we'll discuss the indices, all of which were at all-time highs, with the exception of IWM and the NYSE. The industrials, Nasdaq, and S&P 500 all outperformed last week. Hang Seng was up 5%. All of the leading tech stocks, in addition to Microsoft, Intel, and Tesla, were higher last week. The bond stock ratio is short-term bullish, long-term neutral. HYG and junk are at all-time highs and bullish. The Dow Composite is bullish, and the S&P 1500 is on a buy signal. Institutional sentiment shows TIC and TICQ both bullish. NYMO and NAMO are in a bullish cycle. And breadth thrusts are bullish at extremes. NYAD, number of stocks advancing versus declining, is bullish as well. The one caveat this week is the put-call ratio is bearish at 0.76%, showing there's a load of people buying calls thinking we're moving higher this week, which is a contrarian signal. VIX is at 1528. That's at the 50-day moving average. We need to see that drop if you're bullish. A move higher would be bearish short term. US dollar dropped dramatically last week to 95.72. With the yen popping, that's bearish for the Nikkei. However, the Nikkei did manage to eke out 0.67% gain last week. The British pound US dollar is bullish, which is a headwind for the FTSE short term. FTSE did finish up 1% last week. We still see risk aversion with AGG bullish, SHY, IEF, and TLT are bullish, but they hit extremes at resistance. Perhaps there's some rebalancing to end the quarter. And we also saw gold bullish with a breakout last week. Copper is bullish as well. That turning to the upside is actually bullish for the economy. West Texas crude and USO also spiked last week dramatically on tensions in the Middle East, with Iran and the US going head-to-head. The heat map is improving. It's mostly green for the S&P sectors, and we had the heat map improving for the international markets as well, bullish with most indices for the international ETFs above their 21-day moving averages. We'll look at some IBD 50 names, some FANG stocks, some stocks producing new highs, and also some MarketSmith and Growth 250 names that look pretty good for the week ahead. Bukowski is 5 of 5 green with a CPI signal mixed at 65%. That's bullish, with 12 bearish patterns, 22 bullish patterns, and 192 patterns waiting for breakout to start the week. Bottom line, we're pretty extended. I wouldn't be surprised to see a little bit of a pullback first thing Monday, Tuesday. So we'll play it by ear, but be a little bit more cautious as the bullish cycles potentially a little overextended in the short term. The Spider Weekly finished at recent highs, 294.95, closing the week at 294, having pushed above recent all-time highs. RSI is rising. That's bullish for the week ahead. And we had above average volume, which is significant if we're thinking about bullish trades going into this week. MACD is above its signal line, showing bulls are back in control. SPY Daily shows that rejection on Friday after Thursday's stellar performance and push to all-time highs at 296.31. While TIC cumulative is rising, showing institutions are buying more shares than they're selling in the short term. Many will point to the Gravestone Doji or Shooting Star that we produced on Friday after making an all-time high on Thursday. At resistance levels, we'll watch the 60-minute to start the week right at volume by price support. RSI is overbought, and TIC cumulative is rising to slightly sideways on this time frame. Additionally, the SPY daily, you can see, is in a bullish cycle, having turned over 3 to 4 weeks ago. After flattening out, we started to rise, and we reversed at the 271.77 zone, nearing extremes in the short term. Nasdaq 100, however, has yet to reach the all-time highs that we saw back in April. So the potential is for Nasdaq with RSI rising to continue higher. Watch the FANG stocks. They all finished green last week, with especially like Tesla and Intel, along with Microsoft and Apple. Google also finished the week pretty strong as well. In addition, MACD has turned and bulls are back in control with 3 weeks of solid volume to back up the tech stocks. Remember, seasonality is the strongest the month of July for tech, something that the financial media no doubt will overlook. You can see that the month of July is typically very strong for the tech-weighted Nasdaq. If we look at XLK as well, we can see that that is also very strong, seasonally speaking, for the month of July. The Qs also showed a very similar pattern, flat to sideways, stair-stepping higher along the moving averages for this Q 60-minute chart. Note tick cumulative continues to push a bit higher. That's bullish short term. In addition, the Nasdaq 100 cycle is at extremes. We have yet to reach the all-time highs again, as we just mentioned. Look for this to continue to push higher. The momentum is clearly with the bulls short term. IWM weekly has lagged the other indices, so there is a potential if this does push higher, it could help propel the Nasdaq and the S&P 500 higher along with the NYSE. The weekly chart has potential to move back to 160.54. RSI is just moving back above 50 as we start the week, and MACD is turning, showing bulls are starting to wrest control from the bears as volume over the past 3 weeks was above average. In addition, the S&P 500 breadth thrust ADP, advanced decline percent, pushed back from 30, while the mid caps in the middle here and small caps. In addition, Nasdaq advanced decline percent pulled back from the 30% level, setting up a potential push higher in the short term. It also leads to a possibility that we could flag or move slightly lower for both the Nasdaq and the S&P 500. The other caveat, of course, for the bears is that NIMO and NAMO are both in a cycle up. This bullish turn could continue higher. We're not overbought, as you can see previous occasions. The dark gray area in the background. The signal line, the black line, continues to push higher through the zero line last week. Looking for NIMO and this particular momentum to continue higher into the last week of June. Here is the Nasdaq Mcclellan Oscillator, also showing a very similar situation. Hasn't yet crossed the zero line, but we can see the cumulative effect of the NASI continues to push higher. This cycle most likely leads to higher prices. Now, the only caveat is this is the end of the quarter, and we could see some end of the quarter selling that could keep the index from making all-time highs this week. Remember, seasonality, the month of July, even if we do consolidate underneath 7800 and tee up for a move higher into the month of July. Also consider this chart of the NYSE. We had the 2018 highs way up here above us at 13,600. We're about 500 points below that level and have potential for these 2,000 stocks on the composite. One of the good things, though, for the bulls and a caveat for the bears is that new highs are beating out new lows in a measured way, similar to what we saw back in 2018 before we rolled over. The only reason why the markets rolled over back then was the tariff situation that started the year in February of 2018. Aside from that, we do have the Fed behind us. We have corporate balance sheets very strong. We do have a lot of corporations giving good guidance, and this week we have a number of stocks reporting earnings, as we see FedEx, Lennar, Micron, Paychex, Nike, Shaw Communications, McCormick, and Accenture all reporting this week, in addition to Walgreens Boots Alliance and Constellation Brands. All of these could help us this week. This inverse indicator for the VIX should be staying green if we want to be short-term bullish. This is a 60-minute chart. It did dip down into the red zone. Whenever it's red, we want to be cautious. A follow-through and a continuation lower would be bearish for equities, and one where we would normally see VIX continuing to push higher. We're just coming off of these highs that we saw back in May and June. So we're looking for, if you're bullish, we're looking for VIX to continue to drop. If you're bearish, you're looking for a spike this week with the indices S&P 500 at what could be considered a triple top. So the markets aren't without some sort of risk to start the week. That's why we would issue a word of caution. Let's see how things start out for the last week of June, the end of the quarter. The cycle in TLT price action is suggesting that we could see some rebalancing to end the quarter, as institutions have done very well with bonds since the September-October lows. In a bullish trend, I would think minimum that we could see a pullback to the 20-day moving average or the 50-day, currently at 127. Most likely we pull back to the 20-day. Bonds have been pretty strong, but equities are favored at the present time. As the bond stock ratio continues to drop, that favors equities over the 10-year U.S. Treasury, UST to SPX. So look for this continuation to the downside and look for the S&P 500 to break out on this weekly time frame to start the last week of June. AGG Weekly, one of our largest holdings in the fixed income, also continued higher from the September-October entry level to the recent highs. You can see that we're starting to see some selling up near 111.50. We'll probably start to rebalance this, maybe sell another quarter and see how price action reacts at the rising 10 EMA right around 109.50. All of this happening, of course, as high yield corporate and junk bonds trade at all-time highs, suggesting we could see further upside. This is the daily junk bond chart with Hinkin-Ashi candles, IBB, IWM, and USO pushing higher, although we are a bit overbought. Last time we got overbought to this degree, we did pull back a bit towards the end of April. The US dollar also pulled back pretty dramatically last week, pushing through the 200-period moving average. Anywhere in here we might find support at these pivot levels. With the dollar moving lower, we had copper and gold both moving higher last week. Copper, a reflection of strength in the economy. If this starts to move higher, that would be bullish. You can see what happened back here in 2019 as copper continued to rise. That's bullish for home builders when we see copper rising. In addition to gold, which also broke out pushing above 1352 last week. Look for this to continue higher if the dollar does move lower. In addition to crude oil, which had a rather dramatic move last week with the issues with Iran and the Middle East potentially cutting off supply, crude oil will most likely continue to move higher. Crude oil has been a positive correlation with equities during the October, November, December drop, as well as the rally from December into April. So keep an eye on crude oil. That could be a bullish catalyst as well for the S&P 500 and the U.S. indices. The heat map viewed from left to right each week, this is updated. We can see that we have a lot more lime greens, yellows than we did previously. However, we do not have complete green like we've had in the past. Back here in December and January, this reversed. We can start to see this change in temperature, leading us to believe that we could see more upside in the short term, like we saw back in December, January. If the FOMO crowd kicks in and the quarterly rebalancing results in more buying. Remember again, the Nasdaq 100 typically outperforms in the month of July. That said, we do see strength in materials, mining, also in staples, high yield corporate, as we just mentioned, healthcare, medical devices, healthcare equipment. We have strength in technology, which we would expect. Also, semiconductors are starting to look better. Make sure you check out Intel. It has a nice looking chart that we'll discuss in a minute. And XLU, telecom as well, also looking good. International markets look pretty strong, with many of these trading above their 20-period moving averages, looking similar to what we had back in January when we transitioned from deep crimson to yellows, oranges, and greens. We're looking very similar right now for international markets, with Brazil looking strong, Argentina, Russia, Germany, Turkey, Greece, along with Sweden. Emerging markets look strong. Taiwan, Australia, Singapore, and China all up last week, with Japan pushing higher as well. Here is the IBD 50 list for the week. What we're looking for are stocks that are not too extended, but are above their rising 20 and 50-day moving averages, with the 20 above the 50. We'd like to see increasing volume like we had on Adobe. However, we don't want to see an extreme move to the upside, which would lead us to believe that Adobe has the potential to pull back in a little bit, at least flag at a minimum with RSI overbought. In addition, there are stocks like eBay that showed up on relative strength scans with the MarketSmith Growth 250. This one continues to push a bit higher. It's at ATR2, so it could come back in. A pullback to ATR1 or a follow-through day this week would probably be a decent long, with ADX rising, ADX green above ADX red. The stock looks very strong. It had very good earnings reported most recently. I believe it was about 28% for the last quarter. New Oriental Education was pretty strong last week. It's a little bit far from the mean. It could come back a bit more. If it does, we might have an opportunity. I do see buyers stepped up right around 92.70. You can see the wick in that candle. RSI is pointing to potential further upside. Potentially it gets up to 97.50, 98 before it does form a handle. Looks like a little cup. Potentially a handle around 97.50 to 8 to 98 in the short term. Volume has been above average, and ADX is above 22. ADX green above ADX red to start the week. Five Below also with RSI at 50, trying to push a bit higher. Price action holding right at the mean. We're looking for this to pop higher if retail stocks can be strong again this week, with above average volume on Friday, indicating we could see a follow-through on Monday for this discount retailer. HDB Bank, all of the U.S. banks, from what I understand, had stress tests on Friday. I thought it was this week. Just confirmed that. For the most part, many of the U.S. banks look strong. This particular stock is an India-based stock. It has over 4,600 branches throughout India. Came back to the mean, tested it, buyers stepped up. RSI would like to see turning back up as a function of price. Look for a follow-through or a retest of the 20-day. In the short term, we might have a nice setup here with HDB, especially if the banks get a move on this week. Hexel Corp from previous watch lists continues to push higher holding ATR1 bands as we push higher. The last time we came down and almost tested the 20-day, we had a very nice expansion bar. We've been trading inside of that for the past 4 days. Above average volume on Friday, looking for a follow through and a push higher on Monday and Tuesday. With semiconductors having a strong week, we'd expect to see Intel continue to push higher. Oversold 3 weeks ago, institutions obviously stepped up. Friday we saw above average volume that beat out Tuesday's above average volume. Looking like something's up with Intel. Look for a push higher, follow through, and look for the trend to turn higher as we see RSI rising and ADX green moving above ADX red. Look for a follow through on this one and keep an eye on money flow as it could continue to push with MACD above its signal line and rising, and relative strength of the S&P 500 starting to grind a bit higher. Look for a push above the 200-day and the 50-day just overhead. That's last resistance. If we get above that, then 51.50 to 52 is your next target. Look for Intel to fill the gap. I believe this one's going to continue to move higher in the short term. 3M, not on the IBD 50, but we did notice that RSI was oversold and improving. Continued to push through 50 last week. Looks like it's reversing the trend. A nice little move to the upside most likely would happen if we hear more good news out of China and US. This is the last week. The G20 meeting in Osaka will be the 28th and the 29th, so we're looking forward to that, which could have a nice effect on these major industrial stocks that we've seen moving higher recently, like 3M, John Deere, Caterpillar, Boeing, and others. All of these following through last week. Looking for Boeing to break out of this flag and follow through. Monster Beverages back on the IBD 50 list. Note it's very close to the mean and started to push. You got ATR1 just overhead at 64.22 and ATR2 at 65.59. Potentially a move up to 66 to 66.25 if this continues to follow through. I like the setup. RSI is rising, volume is increasing, and ADX green is about to cross through ADX red. Looking for a follow through on Monster Beverages as money flow is starting to turn. On balance volume is rising, the red line, and relative strength of the S&P is starting to climb again. SS&C starting to move higher. Looking for a follow through. Came down, almost tested the mean at 57.95. Could still touch it. Look at RSI. If RSI starts to turn higher, it'll be a function of price. Looking for a follow through and an increase in volume. Above average volume early in the morning would be a clear indication that this one's probably going to continue to move higher, as we see ADX green moving above ADX red. Looking for a follow through SS&C. In addition, we want to see money flow get back above zero and on balance volume start climbing, in addition to relative strength to the S&P 500 in the top panel. We got the 50-day overhead. That's the last resistance. We get above 60. This one could run back up to 67, 61 and produce the right side of a cup. That's what I'm anticipating will happen on this technology stock into the month of July, the seasonally strongest month of the year. Clovis Oncology, we started the position in this one last week on Wednesday. It came back on Thursday. Now we're starting to see a follow through on Friday. We finished pretty strong. Bullish engulfing candle, though not the largest expansion bar. It's starting to look good. An expansion bar on Monday or Tuesday would be hugely appreciated. If we saw that, more than likely money flow will start to move back to the upside, and we can break this downtrend and push back up to the 50-day in the short term. Looking for a follow through on Target. I thought we might come down to the 20-period moving average. That's where I was looking for potential entry. Didn't get it. Still close to overbought. Look for a follow through day. Maybe this one's just going to continue higher in the short term. Note above average volume. We've got ADX green above ADX red, and this trend is very strong. Tesla also looking pretty strong, held up right at the 20-period moving average. Appears that we've turned the corner. RSI is above 50. Respect the trend. The trend has reversed and starting to turn higher. Looking for ADX green to stay above ADX red. We'd like to see a follow-through day on Monday. into Tuesday, Wednesday, and maybe test this 255 zone in the short term. Netflix has had a strong showing lately, looking for this to follow through, test the upper bands and potentially the 2019 highs just north of 382 as RSI continues to point to higher prices and volume continues to favor the bulls. ConMed CNMD Medical Products manufactures surgical devices and equipment for minimally invasive procedures and monitoring. This looks like it's about to ready to break out of this flat base. The end result of this cup with handle. Look for a follow through. It's still in the buy zone. It's only 1% above its pivot in the past 3 days. Looking for a continuation in CNMD. Facebook also showing up. One of those stocks that we like. Big cup and handle pattern. Looking like we're going to test this handle in the short term, get back above 200. That's the buy pivot overhead, so we're about 4% higher before we get there. Looks like we could be headed for 200 in the short term for Facebook. If gold continues to push higher, look for Kirkland Lake Gold to continue higher as well. Excellent balance sheet, good annual sales and earnings, excellent numbers, EPS rating of 99, composite rating of 99, timeliness rating of A, and SMR rating, sales, margins, and return on equity of an A. Everything you want to see in a stock, under accumulation, a B+, above average volume, looking for this to continue higher. You got about another 7% till it reaches an overbought zone. One of my favorite stocks this week, medicines company, looks pretty good, develops therapeutics and medicines for the treatment of heart disease. Looking for this flag to break out. Big cup pattern, looking very strong, pushing higher last week on above average volume. Company reports at the end of July with price action sitting right on the 20-period moving average. The last time it did that, it pushed off from 31 up to 37. Looking for a similar move. Very nice pattern. It'll tell you if you're wrong. It'll close below the 20-day and continue lower. I would start with a stop just below Friday's low and see where we go with MDCO. Research Frontiers, REFR, showed up on the blue dot scan, looking for a breakout. It's an inexpensive stock, yes, I know. Just keep an eye on it. We'll see what it does. Above average volume, pushing higher. Recently had earnings. I'm looking at this quadruple top. If it does break out, you got a measured move of about $1.50 with the potential on the weekly to get up to about 6 overall. Tuffin Software, a new IPO. You can see pretty nice strength here on this 30-minute time frame. Here's the daily. Looking for higher prices. Above average volume Thursday and Friday. Looking for a follow through. Not the best metrics. Just looking at the technicals on the breakout. See what happens here this week with TUFN. Yeti also had a strong showing on Friday at the end of the day. We missed this one. It started moving higher about noon and just kept going. Relative strength line is climbing to 97. We have annual sales and earnings continues to climb into 2019 and 2020, as we can see in the left panel. EPS rating and composite rating in the 90s looks good. Looking for a follow through with Yeti into this week and going forward. Looking for higher prices in this company that designs, manufactures, and markets innovative and outstanding outdoor products. Yeti, we've traded before. Looking for it to move back up to the 36 level in the short term. Okay, traders, that's going to do it for me. This is Cousin Vinny coming to you from theclosingprint.com with your weekend video newsletter. Bottom line this week, start off with a bit of caution on Monday. Give the opening range a little bit of time. See if we get some of these stocks to follow through. And watch the indices overall. We'll send out the watch list around 11:30 on Sunday and around 8:30 on the West Coast. Have a great weekend, everyone. I'll talk to you soon. Take care, and I hope this helps.